Welcome to week 9. So, we're going to continue with this string of advocacy. We're going to continue with working on incorporating sources into our presentations. So, week, we're going to be working on intercultural communication competency. You've got one thing to read. It is a bit longer, but it really kind of helps set the understanding. There is a PowerPoint that kind of just gives you like a quick framework of ICC. And then this video is totally optional. It's just about how to connect with people who are different from you, not required to watch, but it does have a lot of helpful information. So, we will be doing our last written feedback this week as well. So, just like you did at the podcast, you're going to go back to last week's folder. You're going to watch two of your classmates' advocacy videos, and you will be providing them feedback based off of the questions here, and you'll be posting that feedback in the discussion board for the feedback section. Reading check 5, open note, open book, 2 attempts. The higher of the two scores is what's going to be recorded, just as usual. You do have your 2 blog posts this week that you're going to be completing. So, your big project for the week is going to be an ICC video, so an competency video. I do have an example here. I do like to point out this is from one of my students at one of my schools in Tennessee. He shows his ID at the beginning. That is absolutely not required in your video. That is just a requirement for the school out there to ensure that we're seeing the correct person, but not required. They also have an audience in their video, also not required for this project. So, in this week's big project, you are going to be finding a news story. It can be a news story, it can be you can find it from any website, you can find it on social media because most of those news stories are going to connect to some mass media organization. And you are going to be picking something. There's 2 options here. I always like to point that out because people get a little bit hesitant about picking out something about stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination of a culture, or people belonging to that culture. So you can go that route. I will be completely honest, this is very easy to find these kind of stories, sadly. But if you want to go with something that's a more positive route, you can also do that. You can look at something that has a interesting cultural practice that promotes equality, diversity, intercultural camaraderie. One thing that I always mention, I am from Oklahoma, so I grew up seeing things like powwows. That is a great example if you want to go with something positive. I've also had students that cover the 4th of July and how the 4th of July can bring us together as Americans to celebrate our freedom from Great Britain. So there's lots of options. You can go either or. I leave that 100% up to you. Again, I know sometimes people would prefer to look at the more positive side of life, so I do encourage you to look for things like that as well. So, you are going to be explaining to us what the situation was, what the ICC was, how it fits in. You're going to be mentioning some of the reading, some things that you learned from the reading. You're also going to be incorporating a source. So, just like last week's source, you have to verbally cite it and you should include the website, the title of the article, and the section of the website. And then, of course, if there's an author, we want to give them credit. This one is a slightly shorter speech, so I do like to try to give you a feel of what it would be like if you were in a face-to-face public speaking course. So I will ask that you stand. This presentation only needs to be 3 minutes. You do have a 30-second leeway over and under. Again, if you're over that time, not a big deal. I do not take off points for going over on that time. I just ask that you try to keep it within. So you have to hit at least that 2.5 minute mark. You can use a visual aid. I have had students in the past who have preferred to have a visual aid for this. Totally fine, totally acceptable. You may do that. You are not required to have a visual aid. Again, I just ask that you stand so that you can get that feel for what it is like in a real public speaking course. Some observations that I typically have in this assignment. Because you are standing, a couple magical things happen. Students tend to look at the camera more because they're not sitting directly in front of their computer. So they're less tempted to look down at the screen. And then also, it gives you the chance to practice doing it in one shot. And this is the one speech that typically students will do in one shot because starting next week, everything is going to be done in one shot. You won't be editing anything together, start, stopping. So this is a great project to practice that on. So once you have that, you're going to upload your video to YouTube and make sure that it is marked as unlisted or public if you want, and you will upload that link here to the discussion board. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I am looking forward to hearing what topics everybody chooses. And as usual, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Have a fantastic week, everybody.